The message arrived while I was finalizing a compliance report for a logistics expansion in Seattle. Not late at night, not during a fight, just a normal weekday afternoon, dropped into my phone like an afterthought. We've decided Evan will take your place on the Italy trip. He's better with people. Hope you understand. Mom. That was all. No question, no explanation, no apology, just a decision made without me about something I had paid for, planned, and carried quietly for months. I didn't reply. I set my phone face down on the desk and stared at the wall until the words stopped echoing in my head. Because what hurt wasn't losing the trip, it was the ease with which I was removed. My name is Naomi Keller. I'm 36, single by choice, financially independent, and the person my family calls when something breaks, collapses, or quietly needs fixing. I work in operations risk management, the kind of work no one notices until it's missing. I don't post achievements. I don't announce sacrifices. I just handle things. And for years, my family learned to expect that silence. I grew up in a house where appreciation was measured by visibility. My younger brother, Evan, was visible, outgoing, photogenic, always surrounded by people who made him feel important. My parents loved him loudly. Me, I was reliable. Reliability doesn't get praised, it gets used. When something needed paying, organizing, smoothing over, my name came up. When something needed celebrating, I stayed in the background. Not intentionally, just conveniently. The Italy trip wasn't a vacation. It was a retirement gift for my mother. 10 days. Florence, Rome, the coast. Business class flights, boutique hotels, guided tours I booked months in advance. I paid for everything. Not to impress them, to say thank you in the only language I knew how. For a brief moment, when I first told them, my mother cried. My father smiled. Evan clapped and joked about wine tastings. For a few minutes, I felt included. That feeling didn't last. Evan had been dating Leela for less than a year. She was charming in public, ambitious in conversation, always talking about branding and network energy. She also never paid for anything. Somehow, between Sunday dinners and group chats, the trip shifted. One extra suggestion, then another, until the message arrived clean and final. They didn't ask if I minded. They didn't ask if I could afford it. They assumed I'd step aside, because I always had. I don't cry first. I organize. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Italy, assets review, flights, hotels, insurance, refund policies, name assignments, authorization access. Next to each line item, I typed one word, mine. Then I opened another document, family ledger. In 2019, I bought a small duplex outside Portland. Nothing flashy, solid structure, good long-term return. I didn't buy it for my parents, but when my father's contract work dried up and my mother said they just needed time, I handed over the keys. No lease, no deposit, a promise they'd pay what they could. They rarely did. I tracked everything quietly. Missed payments, utilities, repairs I covered without comment. By the time Evan moved in with Leela after creative differences with his roommates, the number had grown too large to ignore. But I never said it out loud. Silence was easier than conflict. The Italy message didn't come out of nowhere. It landed at the end of a long pattern, requests without gratitude, decisions without consultation, benefits without accountability. The trip was just the first thing they took openly, and something in me finally noticed. I reopened the airline portal. My name was still on the booking. For now, I didn't cancel anything yet. I just documented. Because when people assume your silence means permission, the most powerful response is preparation. I saved the files, closed the laptop, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. I didn't cancel the trip immediately. That mattered, because impulse feels good for a moment, but structure lasts longer. Instead, I started checking details I knew no one else ever bothered to understand. Authorization, identity verification, change logs. The airline app still showed my name on the outbound flight, but something else caught my attention. A modification timestamp from 2 days earlier. I hadn't touched it. That was when the situation stopped being emotional and became procedural. I called the airline's customer service line during my lunch break. Not angry, not panicked, just factual. Within minutes, the representative explained what had happened. Someone identifying themselves as my sibling had contacted the airline claiming I was hospitalized and unable to travel. They requested my seat be reassigned. That request had failed. International tickets didn't allow name transfers, but an attempt had been logged, an attempt made using my full legal name, date of birth, and booking reference. Information only my family had. The word the representative used was flag, a fraud flag. I thanked her and asked for a written summary. She sent it immediately. That was the moment the situation shaped shift. This wasn't about being excluded anymore. This was about identity, consent, entitlement taken far enough to cross a line. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't confront Evan. I opened a new section in the family ledger and labeled it Risk Exposure. I started undoing things, quietly, methodically. The hotel was first, booked under my name, paid on my card. I asked about check-in requirements. No ID verification beyond the name on the reservation. I canceled it. No refund. I didn't hesitate. Then came the tours, the vineyard reservation, the coastal train tickets, the private guide. Each cancellation came with a confirmation email. Each email went into the folder. Next, I changed the credit card number tied to the booking. Then I reset the password on the shared family travel account I'd set up years ago for convenience. Convenience is expensive when it's abused. That evening, I drove to the duplex. I didn't announce myself. I didn't knock. I sat in my car and watched the lights inside. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. I called a locksmith from my phone and scheduled a rekey for the next morning. Then I logged into the smart lock system I'd installed years ago and updated the access codes. I added motion alerts, installed a door camera. Not out of spite, out of clarity. The next day, I contacted a property management firm. Professional, neutral, local. I asked that they draft a formal lease. Market rate, utilities not included, 30-day compliance window. They didn't ask questions. They sent the draft that afternoon. I also emailed a real estate attorney I'd worked with once before. He remembered me. I explained the situation without emotion. He said he'd prepare the necessary notices, properly. The first message from my family arrived late that night. Confused, panicked, disorganized. Something about missing reservations. Something about embarrassment. Something about how I should have told them. I didn't reply. Silence was no longer avoidance, it was structure doing its job. By morning, the messages multiplied. From my mother, from Evan, from Leela. Different tones, same assumption. That I would fix it. I didn't. Instead, I forwarded everything to my attorney. Screenshots, call logs, the airline report. He replied with one sentence. You did the right thing documenting first. The property manager delivered the lease in person. They taped the notice to the inside of the door. Clear language, clear deadline. No threats, just terms. By the end of the day, the tone of the messages changed again. This time, anger crept in. Accusations, claims of betrayal. Claims of betrayal appeared often. Family appeared often. Responsibility did not. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, something settled inside me. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had simply stopped subsidizing disrespect, and that distinction mattered. I didn't rush the next step. Deadlines work better when you let them breathe. I went to work. I kept my routines. I slept better than I had in years. The headaches I'd carried quietly faded. When the 30 days passed without a signed lease, my attorney filed the notice. Cleanly, legally, without drama. The final messages came all at once. Fear wrapped in nostalgia, guilt disguised as memory, promises that arrived too late, still no apology, still no acknowledgement of the airline incident. I didn't reply, because explanations are only useful when the other side is listening, and they weren't. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud. This was correction, a system resetting itself after years of imbalance, and the most surprising part, I didn't feel empty. I felt lighter.
The collapse didn't arrive all at once. It leaked in slowly, like water through hairline cracks no one wanted to admit were there. Missed deadlines, returned calls that never came, excuses that grew shorter and more desperate with each attempt. For years, I had been the invisible stabilizer. Once I stepped away, the imbalance finally showed itself. The eviction notice changed everything, not because of the paperwork itself, but because it forced reality into the open. There was no longer a version of events they could soften, no family spin, no emotional workaround, just dates, terms, and obligations. The property manager reported non-compliance within the first week. No payment, no response, no request for extension. Silence where responsibility should have been. They showed up unannounced on a gray afternoon. Not angry this time. Unsteady. Tired. Years of entitlement had trained them to expect accommodation. This moment offered none. I met them at the door, documents in hand, posture calm. Not defensive, not hostile. Final. They spoke all at once, confusion layered over fear, a sudden awareness that leverage had vanished. They were no longer negotiating with family. They were facing consequence. It wasn't raised voices that marked the turning point. It was silence. The kind that arrives when people realize the narrative they relied on no longer works, when nostalgia stops functioning as currency, when guilt fails to unlock access. For the first time, they saw me not as a backup plan, but as a boundary, and boundaries don't bend. The court date came and went without spectacle, no dramatic confrontation, no apologies, just outcomes. They vacated the property within the legally required window, left behind mismatched furniture, unopened mail, evidence of a life built on borrowed stability. I changed the locks again, not because I needed to, because closure is an action, not a feeling. The messages slowed, then stopped. Weeks passed without contact. I noticed the quiet immediately, not as absence, as relief. The mental noise I'd mistaken for responsibility dissolved. I slept deeply. I focused better. I stopped bracing myself for the next ask. Months later, a single message arrived. Short, carefully worded, an attempt at reconciliation without accountability. It spoke of family, of forgiveness, of starting fresh. It didn't mention the ticket, the identity misuse, the years of unpaid debt. I didn't reply, because forgiveness doesn't precede acknowledgement, and reconciliation doesn't exist without truth. What surprised me most wasn't their silence, it was my lack of urgency to fill it. For the first time, I wasn't managing emotional fallout. I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't translating my needs into something palatable. I was simply living. I spent that winter differently. Smaller gatherings, chosen company, conversations that didn't require justification, support that didn't come with conditions. I realized something then. Family isn't who feels entitled to your resources, it's who respects your limits without argument. I revisited the spreadsheet one last time, the ledger that had once felt like armor. I didn't delete it, I archived it, because it had served its purpose. It had taught me something important. Generosity without boundaries isn't kindness, it's erosion. I never asked them to understand. I stopped needing them to. Understanding is optional. Respect is not. My life grew quieter, not smaller, more intentional, more mine. Some people mistake access for entitlement. They assume love means unlimited availability. But love without respect becomes extraction, and extraction always ends the same way, with collapse. Not dramatic, not loud, just inevitable. I didn't lose my family. I stopped financing a version of it that required my